Alice Smith was about to die, but her husband Bruce was openly having an affair with her sister Rose right beside her. Filled with resentment and unwillingness, she died. When she opened her eyes again, she realized she had been reborn and had traveled back to a year ago, to the day of her wedding to Bruce. He kneeled on one knee, offering her a bouquet of flowers. She smiled and took the flowers, then said to the guests, "Welcome everyone to my and Bruce's divorce ceremony." She threw the flowers at him and snatched his phone. Using Bluetooth, she played a video of him and Rose having sex on the big screen. Rose was horrified, and her mother loudly scolded Alice for causing trouble and embarrassing the family. But Alice retorted, a mistress turned stepmother. "What right do you have to scold me? Your daughter is just like you, loving to be a mistress." Bruce tried to explain, but she stomped on his foot with her high heels. She took off her wedding dress, removed her veil, and left the wedding. As she was descending the stairs, she twisted her ankle and nearly fell, but the son of a wealthy tycoon, David, caught her around the waist just in time. She knew he had power and influence, so she decided to use him as a tool for her revenge. She stepped forward to thank him, taking the opportunity to wipe his suit. Rose and Bruce also approached. Rose was very enthusiastic towards David and even linked arms with him, but he coldly shook off her hand. Alice grabbed David's hand, deliberately spilled wine on her skirt, and then insisted he accompany her to clean it up. He initially wanted to refuse, but when she whispered something in his ear, his attitude immediately changed, and he asked Alice to wait for him in a room upstairs. She took the room key card, flaunted it in front of Rose and Bruce, then walked off triumphantly. Alice was in the bathroom, thinking about how to seduce David when he suddenly appeared behind her, making her feel flustered and shy. She quickly ran away. She recalled what she had just said to him. "If you want to become the heir to the group, you have to cooperate with me." As expected, she had guessed what mattered most to him. She added, "You've been competing with your cousin Tom for the group's inheritance these years. My family owns the most precious Empire Star diamond. If you cooperate with me, I'll give you the diamond and help you defeat Tom. In return, you must help me take back my group. I want to be the heir too." David agreed to her proposal, but he had one condition. She must marry him. She was stunned at first, but after some thought, she agreed. He suddenly kissed her neck, and she quickly pushed him away. It turned out David had used his mouth to remove the pearl necklace from her neck. He said, "Once we officially marry, I'll return the necklace to you." After Alice left, he suddenly remembered the little girl who had comforted him when they were young, who also wore an identical necklace. As soon as Alice returned home, her stepmother ordered her to kneel. But she immediately stood up and slapped the maids. Rose scolded her, but Alice gave her a hard slap across the face. The stepmother slapped Alice, but Alice, unwilling to back down, slapped her several times in return. At that moment, David's assistant arrived with bodyguards, bringing an expensive dowry. Rose's mother was overjoyed, thinking David had come to propose to Rose, but David's assistant said, "This dowry is for Alice. David will soon marry her." Rose was furious and tried to strike Alice, but Alice slapped her back. Bruce arrived and accused Alice of being vain, then threw her onto the bed. After Rose forced Alice to drink the aphrodisiac, Bruce took off his coat and leaned over to assault Alice. But David arrived just in time, kicking Bruce to the ground and saying, "How dare you touch my woman?" He picked up the unconscious Alice from the bed and prepared to leave, but her stepmother blocked their way. He said, "Anyone who dares to stop us today is making an enemy of me." The bodyguards pushed Rose and her mother aside, escorting David and Alice out. Due to the effects of the aphrodisiac, Alice hugged David in the car and kissed his lips, causing him to stare wide-eyed in shock. His assistant hurriedly got out of the car because he knew it was David's first kiss. David took Alice back to his place, where she hugged him in the bathtub and bit his ear. The next day, Alice woke up to find herself lying in bed with David. She screamed. David told her, "I took care of you the whole night, but I didn't sleep with you." To tease him, she intentionally leaned closer to him. She thought he would get shy, but he suddenly pulled her waist towards him and pinched her face, warning her not to mess with him like that again. To get back at Alice, her stepmother decided to team up with David's cousin, Tom. David's grandfather opposed his relationship with Alice and even threatened to kick him out. Calmly, he told Alice, "The company is mine, and so are you." He pinned her against the wall, picked a flower, and tucked it behind her ear. She thought he was going to kiss her, so she closed her eyes, but instead, he suddenly stopped and left with a smile. Later, David was sketching a design for a diamond necklace, and Alice mocked his drawing skills. He pulled her into his arms, ready to kiss her, but his grandfather suddenly walked in, scolded him, and raised his hand as if to hit him. However, he didn't actually strike him and instead agreed to let them get engaged. The next day, after Alice returned home to pack her things, she ran into David's cousin Tom. She bent down to pick up her bag, but Tom used his cane to lift her chin. David stopped him, picked Alice up in his arms, and turned to leave. He carried her back to his place, warning her, "You're my woman, and I don't allow other men to touch you, especially not Tom." Alice teased him, asking if he was jealous, but he stubbornly denied it. To provoke him further, Alice reached out and touched his abs. At night, David stared at Alice, holding her necklace in his hand. He remembered that she once said she would marry him when she grew up, but now she had completely forgotten about him. Alice suddenly turned toward him and moved closer, making his heart race. Alice caught her stepmother secretly selling fake jewelry, so she recorded a video. However, Tom discovered Alice and stopped her from leaving, even attempting to force a kiss. David pushed him away and punched him. Tom raised his cane to retaliate but was still knocked down by David. Tom mocked David, saying, "You, someone who once harmed your own brother, are now soft-hearted and want to protect a woman." David didn't respond, instead taking Alice and leaving. Rose walked up to Tom and said, "I want to cooperate with you. Let's join forces and defeat them." When David returned home, he became emotionally unstable due to Tom's words and locked himself in his room. Holding the childhood photo of him and his brother, he recalled pushing his brother off the rooftop and even smiled. He felt guilty and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Then, helpless tears fell from his eyes. Alice felt sorry for him, walked over, took off his glasses, covered him with a blanket, and promised to stay with him always. The next morning, when Alice woke up, she found herself in David's arms on the couch. She tried to get up, but David held her and kissed her passionately. Just then, his grandfather barged in and shouted Alice's name. It turned out that Alice's stepmother had called David's grandfather earlier, claiming that Alice owed a massive gambling debt, and he believed it. To expose her stepmother's lie, Alice showed the priceless Empire Star diamond. David's grandfather was thrilled because the diamond necklace would ensure their family became the #1 in the jewelry industry. He immediately agreed to David and Alice's marriage. A few days later, at a banquet, David publicly announced that Alice was his girlfriend and kissed her forehead. Tom caught David and Alice passionately kissing outside the banquet hall. He couldn't allow David to take the heir's position, so he called Bruce. Bruce arrived at the venue shortly after and asked Alice to get back together with him, but she slapped him across the face. Bruce said, "Do you think David is a good guy? He's a murderer. He killed his brother." David lost control and punched Bruce. Alice tried to stop David, but he misunderstood and thought she believed Bruce's words. He was heartbroken and left. Back home, he forcefully kissed Alice, but she pushed him away. He thought she was truly starting to fear him, so he grabbed her by the neck and warned her, then pushed her down on the bed. David went to a bar to drown his sorrows. Rose, wearing a seductive dress, approached him, trying to flirt, but he pushed her away. Rose then took out some photos of Alice and Bruce and whispered in David's ear, "Alice is a flirt, but I only have you in my heart." David pushed her away again and said, "You're nothing compared to her." Rose felt dissatisfied and drank a lot of alcohol. Tom walked over, took her hand, kissed her hand, and then picked her up, carrying her out of the bar. The next morning, Rose woke up to find herself in bed with Tom. Realizing she had no chance with David, she decided to use Tom's power to destroy David. She flirted with Tom while leaning on his chest, and he promised her, "As long as you do as I say, I'll help you punish David." Rose was pushed onto the bed and silently swore that after taking David down, she would kill Alice. David became the general manager of the company and revealed evidence that Tom and Alice's stepmother had been involved in the illegal trade of fake jewelry. The employees began to gossip about it, and Tom was furious. David's assistant said to him, "Your fiancée Alice stayed up several nights organizing this evidence. You should thank her and take her out for a dinner." But David hesitated, thinking no one would want to have dinner with a murderer. Tom demanded that Rose steal the Smith family jewelry business's confidential information for him. Rose hesitated, as the information was very private and shouldn't be shared with outsiders. Tom pulled her into his arms and said, "Am I an outsider?" Rose kissed him and urged him to teach David a good lesson. David was surrounded by reporters on the rooftop, who kept asking him if he was responsible for his brother's death. Terrified, he kept backing away, covering his ears. Tom watched from a distance. In fact, it was Tom who had pushed David's brother off the rooftop that day. Alice squeezed through the crowd and extended her hand to David. He remembered how, as a child, she had also reached out to help him when he was helpless. She said, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Slowly, he reached out his hand to hers, just like when they were children. As she pulled him through the crowd, he finally realized he had fallen in love with Alice. Back at home, David was still shaken, holding Alice tightly. He told her that he had gone to the rooftop because he had received an anonymous message claiming they had kidnapped Alice and demanding he meet them on the rooftop. To comfort him, Alice kissed his cheek and said, "I don't mind what happened in the past. I've never regretted marrying you." David kissed her back and said, "Neither have I." Not long after, David and Alice got engaged. At the banquet, Tom also announced that he was now with Rose. Then, he told the guests, "David has a mental illness and is unfit to be the heir of the company. Today, I have brought a witness." A woman slowly walked toward them, and David was shocked to see that it was his psychologist, Emma. He thought he was going to lose, but Emma told everyone, "I have been David's psychologist for many years, and aside from insomnia, he has no mental illness." Tom was stunned and accused Emma of lying, but she said she was willing to swear on her career that David had no psychological problems. David's grandfather was furious and ordered the security to throw Tom out. To solidify David's position as heir, Alice publicly displayed her dowry, the priceless Empire Star Diamond, leaving the guests in awe. Bruce saw Rose kissing Tom on the stairs, and in a fit of rage, he pushed Rose down the stairs, causing her to faint on the spot. The doctor informed Rose's mother that Rose had suffered a heart attack due to the fall and urgently needed surgery, but finding a matching heart would be difficult. Later, Rose's mother received a call informing her that the Smith family jewelry business had been seized due to involvement in black market trading, causing a sharp drop in the company's stock price and a broken funding chain. She suspected Alice had reported them and decided to take revenge on her. Alice saw David happily talking to his psychologist, Emma, and she felt a pang of jealousy. To force Alice into a meeting, her stepmother threatened her, "If you don't come meet me, I'll scatter your mother's ashes." After Alice rushed to the hospital, she fainted due to the powder her stepmother had prepared. When she woke up, she found herself tied to a hospital bed. Her stepmother told her, "Rose's heart disease has relapsed, and she urgently needs a heart transplant. You're her half-sister, and your heart must be the most compatible for her." David, unable to reach Alice on the phone, grew increasingly worried. His assistant informed him that Alice's stepmother's phone was also unreachable, so David immediately ordered his assistant to track her location. Alice tried to escape, but was cornered on the rooftop. She told her stepmother, "If you come any closer, I will destroy my heart." David arrived just in time to stop her. Alice's stepmother was taken away by the doctor, and David tried to approach Alice, but his fear of heights suddenly triggered, leaving him dizzy and disoriented. He tried to remain calm and asked Alice to hand him the scissors, but just then, Tom rushed over and took Alice hostage. Tom pushed Alice toward the railing, demanding that David give up his claim to the company. Alice seized the moment and bit Tom's hand. David noticed the scar on Tom's hand and suddenly remembered that the little boy who had pushed his brother down the stairs had the exact same scar. His memory finally corrected itself. Tom was the one who had killed his brother. Tom admitted it with a laugh, then stabbed Alice with the scissors. David knocked him down and quickly cradled Alice in his arms. But she was already unconscious. Panicking, he rushed to take her away. He held her hand and said, "Don't leave me." Suddenly, she remembered the little boy from her childhood who had said the same thing before he was forced to move away. "Don't leave me." She finally realized David was that little boy. A few days later, Alice opened her eyes and saw David by her bedside. He hugged her tightly, but Emma suddenly interrupted them. Emma had brought her boyfriend to visit Alice. She said to Alice, "It was David who funded my college education, which is why I helped him. Don't misunderstand our relationship." David told Alice, "Your stepmother left a suicide note and donated her heart to Rose." When Rose woke up and learned the truth, she lost her mind. Soon after, Alice took over the Smith family's company. To alleviate the financial strain on her group, David decided to collaborate with her on a $10 million project. She wrapped her arms around him, kissed his face 3 times, and said, "I kissed you 3 times, so you should invest $30 million. He held her waist and replied, "Then I should invest $100 million to make it enough." With that, he kissed her. Then, he kneeled down on one knee, took out a diamond ring, and proposed to her. She extended her hand, and he placed the ring on her finger. He smiled as he stood up, wrapped his arms around her, and kissed her deeply once more.